All right, good morning. Let's get going. All right, I suppose for our live stream crew, it could be a good afternoon, it could be good evening, depending on where they're logging in from. I'm Jeff Durso-Finley. I am one of the directors of college counseling here at Lawrenceville. This is Holly Bergs-Becker, who is my co-director, and you are the fifth form college admission and college counseling update. And what our goal for today is to just give you a sense of sort of setting the scene for what's taking place in the college counseling office right now. Give you a sense of the psyche of the fifth form, the things that they're working on, just sort of update where we are in the process and what's going to happen over the next month or so, and then leave a good block of time at the end to be able to ask and have questions asked and get at some of the root of the things that may be on your mind. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. If you've been to our presentations before, you've probably seen this. This is the College Counseling Office mission statement. Not going to read it out loud, but I'll leave it up there. But I will highlight the two sentences or the two phrases that we have underlined up there, because it's part and parcel to the conversations that we're having in the College Counseling Office right now. As you've heard us say before, the college search process is an extension of the education that students are receiving at Lawrenceville. It's not a separate experience. We build upon those skills that are being used, but just as importantly right now, and as part of our entire counseling process, we believe deeply in that responsible engagement within an academic community, because just as they've done here at Lawrenceville, we want our graduates to really dig into their post-secondary experience. So a lot of the conversations that we'll have within the college counseling office are not only how to be successful or how to navigate the college application process and be successful in that capacity, but be successful once they arrive at college. What does it mean to understand the way a college or a university works, how to work within the higher ed environment, and those conversations are quite interesting. It is actually a fabulous time to be in the college counseling office right now. Again, if you've been to our presentations before, you know that we are working on both academic skills, things that we're building from the departments, inquiry skills, critical thinking, data analysis, written and verbal expression, those things that come out of a Lawrenceville education, but also developmental skills, right? Things like decision making and managing a complex process. We have been talking with the class of 22 about these skills for the last 9, 10, 12 months. But right now is the time when they're coming to fruition. We're seeing them in the office. In some cases, they're grasping onto them with full force. In other cases, sort of saying, oh, this is the time when I need to really employ these things that you've been talking about. I was like, yes, this is the time. But it is incredibly exciting to be in the college counseling office right now as they're writing essays, they're making decisions, they're thinking about their application patterns, they're building college lists, they're envisioning themselves in college. And you can see they're starting to get to this point where they're getting ready to leave Lawrenceville. And that's a really interesting time to be a counselor and to be an educator and be a member of the faculty here. Because for many students, when they start to get to March and April and May, as much as they've loved their Lawrenceville experience, they're ready to go. And they should be ready to go. And we're watching really the seeds of that starting to bloom right now. So these are the things that we're working on in our conversations, even as they're doing the manual part of applying for college. So, in specific, what's going on right now? I made sort of a quick reference to it. But in the office right now, students are working on their main Common App essay. That's what takes a considerable amount of time at this point. And then I always find the Parents' Weekend to be a fascinating time in the fall, because you have students who will kind of just where it falls in October, because you have students who are thinking to themselves, wow, it's like 2 weeks to the November 1 deadlines. I have all the time in the world. And then from the parents' perspective, they're thinking, oh my gosh, it's 2 weeks to the November 1 deadlines. What are you doing? And just the visions of that deadline and the 2 week section is fascinating to work within. But they're doing that. They're working on their supplements. They're determining their first applications. We do have college visitors that are coming in virtually, so they're talking with the college reps that are going to read their applications. Sort of getting into the manual aspect of actually physically getting ready to hit the button to submit. We don't necessarily think about the final list right now, although some of those conversations may creep in. What we want to do is get them to the point that when they do click submit and that application goes out, that first application or that set of first application goes out, we want them to feel confident that they've done their best work. And so then we'll get those applications out, and then give them a little bit of a breather, let them enjoy Hill Week, and then get right back at it. And in some ways, pretend that those applications don't exist, and start to build up their final list and come to the conclusion of their process. So again, once we get past that November 1, the idea is to start working with the class of 22, the seniors, to start building that thoughtful final list, and we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. Give them a chance to really reflect upon it, to think about the decisions that they're making with ample time to be able to talk to you. There has to be a discussion within the family, the way the list is constructed, possible outcomes. They might get some feedback from a college or an application decision that comes in December that helps us get a little bit of a sense of how that application is being read. But if we do all that pre-work and all that good work during November and the early part of December, when students then go home for winter break, it can be a relaxed experience because all the work has been done. They can go home and they can be maybe waiting for some decisions to come back, but are prepped for the next round of applications if that's something that's going to go ahead and be sent out.
So we know that we want to save a lot of time for Q&A for you all so we can get to your specific questions, but we also know kind of what's on the general minds of most parents right now, so we thought we would take a few minutes to dive into some of those before we move on to some of our other programming. But we just want to make sure we get some of these questions answered because we're answering them so much in one-on-one conversations, you might as well dive in. So Jeff and I just cherry pick these along the way. They might fuel some thoughts on your part about other questions you'd want to ask at the end of the program. I think the first one is front and center on people's minds right now. How does Lawrenceville advocate for its applicants, and do you support everyone that applies to every college? And the short answer to the last part of that question is absolutely. Like, we fully believe in every one of our kids. We are, this part of the beauty of this place and the work that we are able to do with them is that we become, their biggest fans and are happy to help them put their very best foot forward with our support. So we are definitely, having served in college admissions, we are highly respectful of the admissions office's authority and decision-making power. We're not telling them what to do with their decisions. We're just trying to lift up each one of our kids as an individual and say, look at this amazing kid. As you're shaping your community, think about this, how this kid may impact your world. So we are, we write very comprehensive recommendations for the students. That's a piece of our advocacy for sure. But also, frankly, we are reaching out to the colleges throughout the year so that they understand Lawrenceville, so that they know the dynamic and the challenge and the opportunity of this place, so that when they pick up a folder from a kid who's from here, they understand the context from which they're coming. And so those two partnerships, I think, are really important. And as Jeff said, we're working with kids with their essays and their applications to help them put their best foot forward, because in fact, that's one of their best ways our ways to advocate for them is to help them do it really well, because that's who they really want to hear from. There's no, the second question up there is, does it matter who else is applying from Lawrenceville? And the real answer to that is no. Our students' candidacies are direct, and their opportunities are connected to how well they compare to the overall applicant pool at the college. So colleges are shaping their communities in very intentional ways. And so what each of our kids, with all of the variety, Lawrenceville doesn't generate a whole bunch of robots. And so there's so much variety in the class that different kids are going to impact their institutional shaping in really different ways. So we have engineers, we have artists, we have people who are deeply involved in the performing arts, we have people who are really good athletes, we have people coming from all corners of the world. All of those things, all of the different possible majors, philosophy majors and math majors, like all of those people have a place and a pool that they're up competing against. And so when it doesn't really matter that kids are coming from the same school, it matters how they're showing themselves in that pool. So we're not in the business of sort of micromanaging, okay, well we can have 6 kids apply to this place only. Oh, wait, there's 9 kids who are interested. Forget it, we're not gonna do that. And frankly, the decisions play out that way. Just wanna reassure you that there are years when a college might take 2 applicants out of 15 applicants for first round applications. The very next year, they might take 8 of 15. It really depends how our kids are faring against the big pool as to how their outcomes.
I'm going to jump in and actually collapse 2 of those questions, the notion about the stretching or reaching, because it does come up every year, especially this time of year when you're getting the first applications organized. And the words encouraged or discouraged are sort of curious and don't necessarily fit, because the answer is neither. We have a conversation about first applications. We have a conversation about admission categories, whether it's a reach or a probable. But the decision as to where a student applies is fundamentally theirs and fundamentally the family's. So and what will happen is so if a student comes in and wants to jump into an an application pool that is a significant reach and says, this is really important to me. I've been in Lawrenceville I'm going on my 4th year now. I've worked incredibly hard. This is the place I really want to stretch and take a shot. Of course they're going to be supported. Now, we may give them some statistical or some information that helps them figure out where they might fit within an admission pool. We're going to talk to them about the other schools that are on their list to make sure they feel confident in that decision. But if they're making an informed choice moving forward that reach school is something that they want to do, they're going to get the absolute full force of our office and of their college counselor to support that application in any way that we can describe to that admission office, any way we can scratch at that door and let them know the kind of impact that student will make. We'll do it. There are times in which students will come in and want to file an application at a place where their record doesn't necessarily support admission, but they want to do it anyway. They're going to get the full force of our office. But we are also going to give them the information that they need to create a good, thoughtful college list in the end that's going to get them exciting and really vibrant options when the process is all said and done. So. In both of those questions that we get fairly regularly, the answer is yes in admission context, but with all the information that they need to make a smart and informed decision, and probably more importantly, be able to articulate that decision to their family. I'm making this choice for this reason with this knowledge in my back pocket, and I understand the benefits of going down this road and the potential drawbacks of going down this road, but here's why I'm making that. That's an adult, thoughtful, information-driven decision, and that's what we're going to try to push them toward.
Yeah, I'm going to jump right into sort of the COVID impact on these kids, and I think some people are concerned right now about the number. This time last year, people were really nervous about what the rumor mill out there about how many kids were deferring their admission and what was that going to happen. What was the impact of that on the applicant pool? And I think that was a contained problem mostly, I would say, and it wasn't actually as big a problem as people feared it might be. The colleges were sort of okay with densifying their campuses, so they let their numbers drop down with some of their increased deferrals if they had them, and then they just brought in the same size freshman class to bring their numbers back into parity. So it's impacting some of the recruited athletes more than anybody, I'd say, at this point, because some of the college teams saw their kids defer for the year. They didn't want to lose a year of eligibility. They just were like, I'm not going to be here and lose this, so I'm going to go do something fun and train on my own and then come back. So some of those rosters are very tight, and we may see that ripple effect for a little while, but that's a very small end of our students that are up against that particular challenge, and we're working through it. I think no issues with the deferrals, and frankly, the next question about the pass-fail grades from what is for these guys their sophomore year. Everybody was at pass-fail. That was more of an issue it was more a concern for families last year because it was just the most recent set of grades were pass-fail, and people were quite nervous about the impact of not having grades since the winter of junior year as they head into their first evaluations. And so actually Lawrenceville, just since we knew that was on people's minds and we knew it could be challenging for them, we pushed Lawrenceville to get some midterm grades out before our normal first trimester grades. We don't have to do that this year. Our kids have a full year plus of grades at this point. And honestly, the college admissions people understood that the whole country shut down around education in that spring, and we did it really well. I think colleges are continually commenting on how much our education and our whole sort of program has persisted over time. So our kids were in a really advantageous spot to have a pretty normal profile to present to the colleges, even though it was in distinctly abnormal times. So they don't care. They understand, they're fine with it. It was a long time ago. It's part of life. So they get to focus on what was still a disrupted year, and I think they're all highly sensitive to that. But they're not going to dock a kid because they have pass-fail grades on their transcript.
And so as students start to get prepared to file the applications themselves, more than 1,800 colleges and universities in the last couple of years went test optional or test blind, given the difficulty that students had with finding test administration sites. And there's always the question, do they really mean that when they say it's okay not to submit your test? And the answer is actually yes. It's been really remarkable to chart the change in how standardized testing has affected the college admission world. And most of the schools, including all the highly selective schools who went test optional, are now piloting a 2 or 3 year period in which they're going to stay test optional and see what happens when that cohort goes through the undergraduate class. Because they're finding that they can create their class just as well without standardized testing as they could with standardized testing. That was a barrier, a constriction that frustrated them, but they felt they had to use it. Now that they were forced to get rid of it, they're finding they don't need it. And it's going to be, if you're sort of a college admission geek, it's going to be fascinating to watch over the next 5 years what happens with standardized testing if they stay test optional. It is entirely possible we're going to see our own test submitters as part of our graduating classes decline and decline and decline and decline as the influence of standardized testing starts to go down. And in fact, we talked to a highly selective school earlier this week who said that in their most recent incoming class, the 2025s, 60% of their applicants did not submit standardized testing. And for many of those highly selective schools, it's been in the 40-45% range, and their incoming class is made up of that group, about 40 or 45% of non-submitters. So not going to be an issue. We'll have a conversation with each individual fifth former as to whether they should submit or which colleges they should submit given the policy, but it's not something that they should be stressed about.
Okay, so then finally, how can I as a parent best help my child finish well? To me, of course, that's a concern for all of us. This is like an anxious time. But I think there are 2 specific things that you can do, and they come in 2 parts. The first is for the next few weeks as they work to file their first applications. Join us in getting them sleep, food, calm, normalcy. Okay, we don't want them to invest in this. We want them to do a really good job, but we don't want them to set aside their entire, health and wellness and connection to this place in order to just fixate on their college process, their college applications. Okay, some kids are in a generating essay after essay after essay kind of mode, and it's never good enough. Okay, they can work with us, see that it's good enough, and be excited to hit submit. The ones that are struggling a little bit, the message that we're sending at this point is, look, start writing. Okay, stop thinking about it, stop self-criticizing, and just let's get drafts. And so this has been a really great week for them with a lot of encouragement from our office saying, you've got 6 days of basically no classes. Like, let's use this. Let's use this to reset, to really focus, to get the activity chart in place, like to get all of the particulars of your application, know what you need to do, get a draft of things so that we have stuff to work with so that you can polish in the next 2 weeks, not be just thinking, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Because when you think about it in the macro, you think this is so hard. But honestly, the kids who are chipping away at these small tasks and at the bigger ones of drafting are saying, wow, this isn't so bad, this is kind of fun. So that's our goal, to get them there. I think you guys encouraging them, and as Jeff said, it's okay that they think they have 2 weeks left, plenty of time. They do have plenty of time. Would everyone like to submit? Parents would love it to be done. We want to find the happy medium there. We don't want them pushing it until November 1st at 11:59 p.m. when they submit. That's frantic. That's kind of scary. But measured progress toward the goal is fine. It doesn't help them to get it in way ahead of the deadline, but they do need time to take some steps back and to edit. So encouraging them to just keep chipping away, doing it well, reaching out to us when they need to, but not every 5 seconds, because they should be confident that they can do this. They can. They're great writers. They're good thinkers. They have resources, and they have skills themselves. And so we're excited to support them, and also to help them see that they are putting their best foot forward really well. So once we get, the second part of that, how can you help now, is actually connected to this particular, the post-November 1 piece of this, which is helping them really feel confident that they have a great final list. It's tricky, but what is a really good list? It's balanced in terms of selectivity. It can be both aspirational and thoughtful. I have, a list that's going to create clear, for sure, options that are places that are matching the student's vision. Okay, we've been working very hard on getting kids to figure out what are those important drivers for their search. And what they've mostly realized is it isn't just something superficial and easy like, oh, I want a big school, I want a school in the city, I want a school in the country, I need an engineering school. It's much more nuanced and interesting than that, and they have really made great progress for that, so we keep sort of checking in with them, like what's the vision here? And then let's build that list around it using selectivity. The 3 dimensions of fit was an article that we sent home to you in June. You might review that in terms of it needs to fit their whole picture. It needs to fit them financially. It needs to fit them from a selectivity perspective. Another great piece of a great list, frankly, is that it's sustainable for students to actually put good applications into the world. It's from a both workload and a sort of human psyche perspective. If they have, last year some of the lists really grew, sort of just exponentially, and it was nuts. And we worked really hard to pull some of those back, but partially fed by this sense of, oh, I haven't seen anything. Those kids hadn't had the nearly as much of the really high quality virtual opportunities to research colleges. Kids can go walk around some colleges now. Some they can't, but there's so much good information out there that they need to be able to trust the information that they're getting. The more applications a kid puts on their list, the less impressive the applications become. They're diluting the quality. So we have a strong message of quality over quantity. Help your kids think about that. There's just no reason to throw on a whole bunch of extra, especially reaches. Do a great job on a few, and then also have time and energy to invest in all of the sort of little work that goes along with really polishing it and making it a quality app. So that's a big deal to us. The all good places for me, that's kind of a refrain that we'll push out to the students. It's not so much like what's your first choice as, tell me about all of the colleges on your list, and have that confidence, working toward the confidence that every one of those places is a place that they're gonna love college and they're gonna go there, and they have a path back to Jeff's discussion of sort of that engaging undergraduate experience and community. We're reminding them constantly that this is an important concept for them to wrap their brains around. Like we're not here just to get them into college, okay? In fact, we're just launching their college career. And so seeing the potential, seeing the upside of all of the places on their list and how they're gonna navigate it to make the most of that opportunity is an exciting concept, and it's really helpful for their psyche, okay? We actually are paying a lot of attention to how they're navigating some of this. Managing college costs, if the cost of college is of concern to you, a final college list needs to address that head on. It's a terrible strategy to wait until April to decide that, wait, I don't have this, I can't afford these options. Financial aid is a wonderful thing. Merit scholarships are alive and well. We can help kids and families if they talk about it now. But if you wait too long and you don't shape a list with college costs in mind and how the different colleges put their financial aid together, and where the student stands relative to some of those opportunities, that's a problem. So keep that front and center. Have those hard conversations now. Do the work with the net price calculator so that you have an idea of what kind of aid might be coming your way from each college on the kids list. And talk to your counselor, please, about this, because it's something we can navigate very well now if we know. It's much harder to deal with in April, almost impossible. And then admissions practice awareness, just quickly, that's just understanding all of the rhythms of how different colleges are approaching their selection process, what's the effect of applying or not applying first application in the early cycles to particular colleges, what's the effect on their capacity to get aid, what's the influence of demonstrated interest so do they need to do some extra work for some of the colleges to make sure that the college understands they're interested? So these are some of the nuances that factor into making a great college list, final list. And we will keep at them, okay? We will, just so you know, we as an office will spend a great deal of time as an office sitting this happens in November as kids start to give us their final list, is looking at students' transcripts, testing profiles, and just their sort of candidacy writ large, and seeing how 7 sets of eyes are going to actually think about whether this is a really good list or not. So we can catch things, we get kids in our blind spots, we really get attached to our counselees, and so other people who don't have the same attachments are able to sometimes add a layer of scrutiny that is really important for us. And so sometimes we'll come back, and this is one more place where you can help. We will come back to students after those meetings and say, I like your list a lot, but my colleagues reminded me that we're really nervous about this college's their new plan to admit 60% of their class early decision, and what that's going to do to your regular application candidacy. So the spaces are tight, or well, here's what we saw in early, and we're nervous about this. We need you to add a couple more schools in these categories. We need you to rethink something. As parents, if you can help a kid be excited and positive about that reality of adding a couple more schools, of making it a little safer, it helps the student psyche and the process enormously.
So some students have been thinking about their college process for a long time, maybe even since they arrived at Lawrenceville. They've certainly been engaged in it over the last 10, 12 months. And now as we're moving into the first applications, things start to get a little bit more intense in terms of the thought of actually pushing the button and submitting an application. And that sometimes can create some really interesting application psychologies, especially in terms of the final list building. So these are just some things that we run across. So from the perspective of what as a parent can I do now, these are things to just watch out for. As we're moving through the final list building, some of these things pop up for different students, and they are, it's good to just keep an eye on it, because it can affect the way a student affect the way a student builds their list. So as we start to, again, make that final list, and we're thinking about other schools to potentially add, this interdependence, there are times in which a student will start to think, well, I have this one school that I'm really excited about. I'm not sure I want to add this other school, and it's coming at it from a perspective that they're worried that the first school is somehow going to find out that they've got multiple loves, and it could affect that other application somehow. Everything is completely separate, right? So building a good, thoughtful, broad list will have those, and adding other colleges will not affect the reads at any of those colleges. It's a completely separate process. There's no bringing together of that. This December-May relationship thing has to do with students who find some success in the first round of admission, and so perhaps, or applying early action, are admitted to a place they're very excited about. They could see themselves matriculating there, and they go in and they just hack at their list. They say, I'm in this place I really like, and so I'm only going to apply to these 2 super reach schools. And we will have the conversation with them in December that says, okay, we're behind you if this is something that you want to do, but just remember how good you feel now, and do you think you're going to feel that good in April or in May when you file your commit card, if that's the school where you're going to attend? And probably 75% of those students say, absolutely. And then 75% of those students who end up matriculating at that school say, geez, I really wish I had more options. So it feels very different in April and May to have a choice of where you might attend based on places that you're excited about, versus feeling that you've constricted your list so much that that place you were admitted in December is your option because you don't have other options. So just think about that if your child ends up in that circumstance. The choice predetermination happens all the time. I must have had 3 or 4 conversations about this in the last 10 days. And it's as students start to build their final list, they will say things along the line, or they would think to themselves, well, I have school A, which I really like, and I have school B, which I really like, but if it came right down to it, I'm going to attend school A over school B. So I'm not going to apply to school B because I would prefer to go here. Right? So in essence, they've already made a choice before they have that choice. And they've already predetermined what might happen. And as I say to them, you can't choose between options if they're not options. And so you need to follow through on those applications so that if they get to April and go, yeah, I was admitted to A, I was admitted to B, I'm going to A. They can do that. But if they never applied or they weren't admitted to A, that choice has already been determined for them. So again, it's trying to make some choices now before they're in their hands. Every once in a while, it's probably maybe once or twice in a given year, we'll have a student who will say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply incredibly aggressively. I've got these 5 super selective schools, and if I don't get in, I'm just going to take a gap year and reapply next year. Okay? Terrible decision. Gap year is a great decision. That's a fabulous thing to do. My daughter just did a gap year and had a tremendous experience. But what will happen is in that particular circumstances, the student comes back around, re-enters into first year, first semester applicant pools with the exact same credentials and possibly into harder admission pools. And things haven't changed other than the size of those applicant pools. And if they're doing something interesting, they're traveling abroad or they're doing some volunteer work in a rural area, trying to put together their applications when they're away from technology can be a real challenge. So gap years are great opportunities, but create a good thoughtful list, find a place you're excited about, and then when you get to the end of the academic year, if you feel like you need a break or do something different, enact that gap year, and off you go. You just defer, wait a year, and you come back the following fall. Great option. And the Goldilocks syndrome, you can probably guess, as they're starting to build a final list, and we're trying to make sure that students are going to have options that are really going to work for them. Every once in a while, we'll have some students who will say, okay, well, that's a little bit too rural. I wasn't thinking that far south. I was thinking like in the 8,000 to 10,000 range, and that's got 11,000. So I don't think that works. And just start to add parameters that kind of restrict what the list will look like, which in the end, I understand where that comes from, but realistically, most colleges and universities probably have an overlap of characteristics that are of 80 to 85%. And again, the 10 or 15% are important, but for most students, they're not deal breakers. So trying to find a good broad range of schools where students can be successful is part of the goal. And in fact, it's one of the very interesting things about students at Lawrenceville is because we're a good-sized institution that has some heft and some energy, but we also break it down with the Harkness methodology and with the houses, our students actually can thrive at an incredibly wide range of schools. They can really make their education sing at the smallest liberal arts colleges, but they can handle the big flagship universities. And so it makes this for an interesting process of building a college list because they don't necessarily walk into their process thinking, I have to have X kind of school because I know I can be happy here and I know I can be happy there and I know I can be successful at both. And that's actually true based on their experiences here.
Okay, so what's on our mind? We've tipped our hats to some of these things already, but just kind of quickly, what we're thinking about, these are things that keep us up at night. One is just making sure that the kids are able to put their best foot forward into the application, actually feel really good about it. And when we did this program on Thursday, I would tell you one of the questions that came up a lot in our chat, because we did it on Zoom, was, well, can they change their application after they submit it on November 1st? Do they have flexibility? So I'm just going to clear that up quickly. If they apply to a college for November 1st, that Common App is locked in, but they can make changes for every single subsequent Common App they file. Okay, so they're not stuck with that one. They're going to have time to keep working on their applications. And we want kids to feel like they have that they can learn from their first attempts. They can keep refining their self-presentation. So we want them to put their best selves in. We want them to feel great when they hit submit. We want them to feel like, I did a great job here. This is really me. I'm giving myself my best chance at this college, and now I'm moving on to the rest. We're really strongly encouraging them to take care of each other and themselves, okay, and to really be generous in their support for their friends, to not spend the whole time all of their interactions thinking and worrying about colleges and thinking about each other as anything other than a fantastic community mates in this amazing place. Ignoring the noise and control what you can control. These are strong mantras from us. There's a lot of chaos and a lot of extraneous fear-based rumor mills that fly around the college process. It's complicated, it's hard. We have really good information for these kids. They have the ability to control some parts of this process, like the quality of their application, the quality of their engagement at this place. What they can't control is what, the college is deciding to do about their legacy policy, or what's going to happen to, with too many early decisions. Like they can know what's happening out there, but they can't control those things. So why worry about that? Like, worry about what you can do. Put your energy into this process and feel good about it, okay? And not feel commodified by it, okay? One of the things we struggle with is sometimes kids start feeling like a pawn in a process, that they're not feeling that they're able to just be themselves, or they don't want to be sort of marginalized and put into a particular category. They represent so many things to so many colleges, so every kid is going to be read with multiple lenses, and we think it's important for them to celebrate that and realize that they can showcase that and be really successful. This is a psychologically fragile time. Okay, we are concerned, and let's face it, these kids have had a big disruption in their high school career. That's a reality. What the effects of that are on our minds. Okay, and we're seeing different presentations of it. Some kids are like scrambling for more attention and control than we've ever seen. Others are more disengaged than we've seen. And so there's not a one-size-fits-all fragility to this, but we have to sort of see where they are, and our goal is to get them through this really well, feeling independent, feeling confident, knowing that they were thoughtful, and feeling really supported. So, this is a project that is on our minds, and we're recognizing. I just want to tell you, like, we're keeping our eye on it, and we know that it's tricky, but they're resilient kids, and this is part of it. Stress is a growth inducer, and they've been through a lot, but they should be proud of coming out the other side, and they have so many skills and so many opportunities ahead of them. So we're excited about that. And finally, these are, again, repetitive a bit, but these are messages, strong messages we're sending to seniors. When we said don't make this year all about college to them in the opening session we had in September, they cheered, actually. We reminded them they hadn't been together as a class in a long time. And they had this great opportunity to be back together, to meet new friends, to sit at Abbott, to deepen, take advantage of this place. And they're excited to do that. And they need to be reminded to do that, because this is the whole point of them being here is not just to leave, okay? It's to be here and gather all of that. We want them to be excited about every single college on their list. We want them to know that their process can be private, okay? It's a very public place. When you live with everybody, there's this instinct that says, oh, well, everybody knows everything about me. And it used to be that they would dump the acceptance or the decision letters on the big table in Abbott or in Upper, and it was all the mail, and you could tell by the size of your envelope what the decisions were. That was very public, okay? You wanted to get to the mail bin mail table before everybody else knew your decisions before you did. Now there's this weird dynamic where the colleges will tell the kids like what time they're going to release their decision. Okay, we're like, be private about that. You do not need to walk around in the 3 days leading up to your decision with a sign on that says, I'm going to get my news from College X at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Like, don't do that. Get your news when you're ready. Get it in your room by yourself or with, your parents if you want to. Like, figure out where you want to get your news and process it, okay? It's your news. It's not everybody else's news. And if you don't want to tell your friends where you're applying to college, that's fine. That's great. And that should be respected for each other. So we're giving them room to try to take strong action on this front. Same thing with social media, and we're urging parents to do the same. Like, social media is not a place to process college news. It's just not. It's really destructive in so many levels. So it really sends very strange signals to the kid themselves about what matters in their lives. So be careful about that, and help us continue to remember that this is a private process. This is a journey. It's a whole process. It's not just a one-shot deal with an outcome. And then I guess finally, thinking about the fact that, or next to penultimately, we're here to support them. They have our unconditional support. If we're giving them information that is, that makes them concerned that their selectivity odds don't seem as promising as they thought, that's not us not supporting them. That's us helping them figure out, giving them the information they need to make a decision they can be comfortable with. Okay, so definitely know, and we're trying hard to keep them realizing this, like we are on their team, we are flying their flags, we have information, we can have a dialogue, but we care about these kids enormously. And then finally, we're working hard to try to give them methods for making the process stress-free so that we get the kind of reaction going, okay, wait, this is it, I got this. This isn't so bad, this is kind of fun. Like that's our goal, okay? It is totally manageable. It doesn't have to be manic. And so we're gonna really keep trying to give them that perspective, give them the confidence that they can read their essays and say, or their short answer responses and go, oh, I like this one, or oh, this one's kind of boring, I want to work on this. Great, they can trust themselves to feel good about what they're putting out there. They have resources around us, we have a big office, and we also are working really hard on their rec, so we're busy too, and but it's a partnership all around, and we're happy to be helping them. Okay, it is 9:44. We are happy, this is a small crowd. We're happy to answer some questions from the crowd. I think it'd be great. Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about the December, May sort of transformation and how the student perspective desires change? How does that relate to early decision? I mean, those two, and then also those two sort of built for, right? And then how many students actually do choose percentage-wise, choose an early decision school?
So the question, for folks who didn't hear it, centered on essentially on early decision and thinking about if a student applies early decision and is successful, how does that psychology play out when they get to April? Maybe it's buyer's remorse potentially, and then also approximately what how many of the seniors will elect to go the early decision route? Do I have your questions correct? Okay. Yeah, the first one's an interesting question. I'm not sure if I have a good answer for that. I don't run into it very often, to be perfectly honest. I think our students are very, very good at research. We push them hard to be thoughtful and go beyond the surface and ask those second and third level questions so that their understanding of institutions is pretty deep. So I have to say I don't run into that very often. We do have, there's a little bit of sort of chatter right now in higher education about the resilience or the fragility of the last class that has gone out into college in terms of the transfer rates going up, or students returning home or taking time off, most likely based on how challenging the last couple of years have been. But that's not necessarily related to the initial choice that they made going into the process. I want to say 25% of our kids will apply just flat out early decision.
And we'll commit. We'll get in.
Yeah.
Not apply, but get in and settle their plans.
And you probably heard me reference it slightly talking about first applications, which is the phrase that I use more than where are you applying early, because first applications encompass a wide range of possibilities. There could be early actions, there could be rolling admission schools, usually somewhere between 68 and 72% of the fifth form will have an offer in hand by January 1st. That doesn't mean that's going to be where they matriculate. It could be an early decision school, but it could be a range of early action schools as well, and actually moving students into that realm of having good, thoughtful first applications. I'm talking about making the process stress-free, knowing that you have a place in hand when you go home for winter break, even though you may keep applying. Really makes that winter break a lot better than waiting for your first affirmative decision to come back in April.
Yeah, I would just jump in. I think that early decision is something that a lot of our kids are thinking about and using really effectively, and they aren't having that buyer's remorse. I think what Jeff is really talking about when we talk about that December, May issue is more when a kid gets into perhaps a school that they're perceiving, they've done one of those early action schools to somewhere where it's sort of in the middle of their list or a probable on their list, and they get news from that, and then they dump all their other choices in those categories and only apply to reaches because they've entered that process thinking, that's good, I'm fine with this one. I got into, but they're thinking they're having choices because they're still applying to colleges, but they aren't thinking about the fact that they're big reaches. So the kids who get into one of their top choice colleges early action and decide to pull out of all other things, those kids are very happy and fine. They don't come into that like buyer's remorse moment. It's more the kids who are just assuming that the next round of only reach colleges applications are going to get them a choice. That's an issue. So we're often talking to kids after they get into Places Early Action in December to say, okay, flow chart this for me. You know, help me understand. If you get into this school, how's that going to impact your list? Like, what's driving that? Are you looking to make sure you have choice, or are you just so happy with this one place that you've been admitted to that you don't need rivals? You know, like, let's think about it a little bit more deeply. So the early decision kids are really locked in and happy about it, relieved about it in so many ways, because often they've gotten even a selectivity advantage to do it, and they've made a really conscious choice to go after that, and they're smart. They're so, thank God, you know. So, yeah.
Last application season was an exceptional year because there were a lot of variables which, you know, you're surprised that you were so hard from the previous pools of applicants. And I'm quoting probable more number of applicants to the school. They don't consider some scores which you would be. So based on the last year experience, thinking to this year, did you have surprises based on this variable? Again, more applicants to the schools which our kids want to apply. Things, I mean, from your perspective, Lawrenceville, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that student didn't get there and he should. Or, oh, no problem, Lawrenceville, the staff of approval of education, we weathered the storm, we just go on. How was this exceptional year last year from your perspective? Was a surprise? Was actually, no, it was a regular year. We are in a safe group here. We are good.
Yeah, it's an interesting question for the folks on the live stream. The question was about essentially with the intensive changes that took place last year. Were there surprises that we saw? Did things play out the way that we expected? And so what was the sort of the after effects given everything that went on? Yes, it was sort of an unprecedented year in many ways. And in fact, sort of Common Application was reporting that among the most highly selective schools, they went up by average of 22%. This is all after a record year in 2018 and 2019. So they had their highest pools ever and then went up 22%. And in fact, that number went all the way down to the selectivity scale. So even sort of the mid-range flagship universities, public institutions, they were up 17%. That was a little bit of going into it a little bit of a surprise, but in retrospect, it made complete sense, right? Because a lot of these places went test optional. So a student who had a very strong academic record but wasn't a strong test taker is now looking at that pool saying, oh, I don't have to submit my tests. I know my GPA range fits this school. I know my standardized testing would normally have had me come in under their threshold. Well, geez, I'm going to apply now. And boom, all those pools shot up. There's also a sort of a secondary psychological effect that happens that when there's sort of chaos or strife or something happening nationally, the student psyche tends to gravitate towards the most highly selective schools, the schools that they know the best. So for example, after 9/11, there was this little chatter of whether Columbia and NYU would decline in applications versus because of safety. Nope, both shot up. Pretty impressively so. So to your specific question, when we did our sort of post-game analysis at the end of the year, to be perfectly honest, we looked at the sort of the candidacies of our kids, looked at the pools that they were in, and it matched up really well. We really felt like they had done a good job fighting through some of the noise and the fog of getting to their research. They were in the right pools. Certainly it's challenging, but it was very rare when we looked at a candidacy and said, that seemed really off. It seemed things lined up pretty well from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that doesn't take away the sting of how we perceive our students as to be extraordinary all the time, and realizing that some of the schools that the what you're speaking of, the places they're really all got their eyes on are now admitting 3 and 4% of their regular pools. That's hard, and you know, we always think more of our kids should get in than do, but, but, you know, we're like, hey, you know, but the reality of the admissions world is it is just getting harder and harder, and you know, our kids are doing well, but okay.
So we need to transition to the fourth formers, fourth form parents who have lots of questions, as you might imagine. You guys have been listening to these programs for a good year, so you guys are the experts at this stage. You could probably do the program for the fourth formers. But what we'll do is, as we transition to the next group, we'll just sort of stay up here if there's any last questions. But have an awesome day and a wonderful Parents Weekend, and thanks for coming. I'm just going to switch the thing, and then I'll come down.
Ask you.
Okay.